Good evening, everybody in Luqman Nation. This is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm at the Shaheed Luqman. And welcome to Coffee, Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. We're glad to have you.
Yes, we are. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight is Thursday, April 12th. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. in the belly of the beast.
The belly of the beast.
The nation's capital. And we're going to try really hard to get to some of the issues behind the issues in this gathering storm that's going on in the Syria conflict right now, because we need to understand all of the moving pieces that are involved in this issue. This is not just the United States versus Russia flexing each of their muscles kind of issue. This is much deeper than what you're being told in the mainstream media. And we need to talk about these issues. But first, we want to give you guys a chance to invite some people, share this video, grab a snack, a drink. We're not going to be on here all night long, but we really do have to talk about these issues. Before we get into this issue, though, we do want to remind you that you can support Luqman Nation through several ways: through Patreon, through GoFundMe, and through PayPal. Just look for us under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation, in all those platforms.
And also, if you would like to get updated on when we're going to do our next live stream, please click the notification icon on this video. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, even though I don't think we use Instagram much, but Instagram.
Yeah, we don't.
No, we don't. Instagram, and also check out our other programs, Pit Bulls and Politics, and the soon to be relaunched Brick by Brick. But before we go into the Syria thing, I want to update our audience on some of our upcoming events. Yeah,
because we've got a lot of stuff going on. Tomorrow night, we are going to be in Richmond, Virginia at the 15th anniversary banquet for the Virginia Defenders. Our good friends Phil Willeto and Anna Edwards are celebrating 15 years.
15 years of activism.
Activism on behalf of displaced and disenfranchised people, largely African-American population in Richmond, Virginia, through the Virginia Defenders for Justice and Equality. That's the official name of the organization. So they're having an anniversary banquet tomorrow night in Richmond at 7 p.m. And not only will Luqman Nation be there, but we will bring you a portion of the program live.
Yep, so it's like you being at the banquet too. And because we can't rest on our laurels, after we attend this banquet, then Jackie and I have to go jump in the old gray ghost.
Yeah,
the gray ghost. And then we have to travel back up here to DC in order to participate in the anti-war rally that we will both be speaking at.
Right.
So so we're going to be busy, but we're glad. This is the type of work we like doing, we love doing. And with the events that are happening right now in our world today, we really need all hands on deck. So we're really coming down a very dangerous road in this precipice, and we're at the precipice of I'd say very dangerous proportions here.
Yeah.
And we also everybody knows what's been happening with the Trump thing, so we want to start, Jackie, by let's updating the audience, if you haven't, if you don't know, some of the events which have brought us to where we are right now.
Right. So a couple of days ago, Donald Trump tweeted some things. You know that's what he does. He tweets some things, and he made a comment in response to comments that were made by a top Russian official to some media outlet that wasn't aired here in the United States until Trump tweeted what he said. And basically, first Trump starts off by saying that, Russia needs to let us help them with their economy. And the only reason we have such a bad relationship with Russia now, it's worse than it's been since the Cold War, is because of fake news. But then he goes on basically to threaten Russia to say that, listen, missiles will be flying at you soon, and they'll be coming at you fast and smart.
Fast and smart, this guy.
Okay, here's what. Now, everybody saw Trump's tweets. And then, unfortunately, because you can't stop the tweeter-in-chief from tweeting.
Right.
So everyone saw his tweets. Then everyone saw the comment that Trump was allegedly responding to from the top Russian official. And I think this guy, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce right now, is like the Secretary of Defense for Russia.
Yeah,
he's the equivalent,
right.
He's the equivalent of the Secretary
Defense
of Defense
Minister or something.
Defense Minister for Russia. The interesting thing about the comment that the defense minister for Russia made was that he made those comments. What he said was, if the United States strikes Syria again, the way they did last year,
right.
the way the United States military did last year, then Russia would respond by not only targeting the missile, but the vehicle.
The vehicle that launched the missile.
The vehicle
right.
that launched the missile.
Which are our Navy ships.
The interesting thing about that comment, that sounds provocative and frightening, right? It sounds like, oh, the Russian bear is just on a rampage. Here's the interesting thing about that comment. That comment was made last month. It was made on March 13th. And it was made in an interview that the Russian defense minister was doing to a Lebanese news outlet. Now, why is that important? This was not reported to you on any news outlet.
And we're going to talk about why that the lack of reporting on all of this by the American news media, why that is detrimental to us as American citizens. But, you know, we'll get into that.
We'll get there. This is almost like kind of a rabbit hole kind of thing. And I hesitate to use the phrase false flag. But I know y'all love that. But if anything were to be a false flag, this is one of those things that could qualify as that. Because what you're being told about what's going on isn't really what's going on. So it's important that the Russian defense minister made these comments to a Lebanese news outlet.
Right.
And I think it might have been Hezbollah television. I didn't know they had a television. I don't know. But it's important that we know that these comments were made a month ago. So it wasn't like last week that this Russian defense minister said this. So Trump literally pulled this comment from last month out of nowhere for no real reason whatsoever.
Wow.
That you can readily see. But there is a reason he did it. There's several reasons he did it. But the Lebanese outlet is important because the reason Russia is even involved in Syria at all is because of the tenuous relationship between Israel and Syria and the proxy relationship between Israel, Syria, and Iran.
Right. And also the fact that Hezbollah, which is heavily supported by Iran. But I want to also go back just a little bit.
Okay.
Is that the Russians also got involved is because of the Obama administration. It's not NATO. They always say NATO, but it was the United States. When the Obama administration decided that it was going to be that they were going to do a regime change in Libya. And of course, the plan was once they got rid of Muammar Gaddafi, the plan was, and trust me, this was the plan, to do the same thing in Syria.
Right.
You know, what they didn't count on, and when I say they, I'm talking about the United States and their Western allies, what they didn't count on was Russia intervening. And so Russia kind of just messed it all up. Because that was the plan under the Obama administration. The plan was to take advantage of the Arab Spring. And that happened a year before, a year or two before, and use the Arab Spring as a cover for U.S. military intervention in the so-called Middle East, into Africa and to Syria, and they were going to use the Arab Spring as a cover to get rid of everybody they didn't like.
Exactly.
And Muammar Gaddafi was when he was removed from power, unjustly, I might say, which was against the international law. The United Nations didn't sanction it. The United States did what it always does. When it doesn't like something that the world community is against, and therefore, then they just say screw it and they do it anyway. So this put the major superpowers on footing. Russia decided that no, American interventionism with regards to Syria, because the Russians, they actually caught the Russians by surprise. The Russian Security Council, on the Security Council, they did go against removing Muammar Gaddafi. The United States did it, but the Russians drew a red line. You're not going to do it in Syria. Right. And that's what happened. So this is very dangerous, Jackie, because there has been quite a few close calls in Syria, which could have put the two superpowers on a direct confrontation. Right, right. And it's interesting because there are so many other factors to this conflict between the United States and Syria. When you peel back the layers, you see it's not really between just the United States and Syria. We're talking about other world powers coming together to stop American imperialism. Again, even as they are coming to the defense of somebody like Bashar al-Assad. And we're going to talk about those chemical weapons things, because there still has been no direct connection between Assad and chemical weapons attacks. Well, you know, before the whole chemical weapons attack, the first thing was barrel bombs. The first thing was, and I don't understand why do you have to call them barrel bombs? If it blows up your house and kills your whole family, what do you care whether it's a barrel bomb, whether it's a bunker buster, whether it's a hand grenade? It doesn't. But you know how we love to show off our toys, and then that's why we do this, because we like to name the different ways we can kill people around the world, because that's a form of terrorism and intimidation that we use. That you gotta be aware, right, when politicians start naming weapons specifically. Well, and then, I mean, you call something a barrel bomb, right? And we talk about language, and we always on the show, we always try to encourage our audience, as we encourage ourselves, to always look at the language that is used. Yes. So when you talk about barrel bombs, right? Barrel, you know, to say that is to make it more sinister. Exactly. You know, it's not just a bomb. No, it's a barrel bomb. Right, it's a barrel bomb. President Assad did an interview that I saw a while ago, where he spoke about that, and he said, you know, what is a barrel bomb? A bomb's a bomb. You know, why? You know, I think that just like in all of these conflicts and things that, and it's not just the United States, it's you know, countries want to use, they want to manufacture events. They want to manufacture incidences, which because what I don't understand, Jackie, is the fact that we're all outraged over the supposed chemical attack in Doha, I believe. Doha, yeah. Right. So we're all bent out of shape about that, and rightfully so. I mean, no one wants to see people attacked with any kind of weapons. But here you are, United States is ready to go to war behind an alleged chemical attack by Assad. But yet at the same time, we don't talk about the chemical attacks that's being done to people in Flint, Michigan. Exactly. We don't talk about the chemical attacks that's being done to us through the food we eat, through our water, through. I mean, so and so, you know, nothing's being done about that. Nothing's being done about Flint still 3 years later not having suitable drinking water. Right. But yet, you know, Trump 4 years later. Yeah. 4 years later. But yet, you know, here it is, Trump threatening military intervention in Syria, more military intervention in Syria, behind alleged chemical attacks. Now, the reason why, Jackie, I believe that this is a false flag. The Russians, whether you want to take their word for it or not, had said that there is no evidence that that this came from Assad, that this came from the Syrian military, that this came from any rebel groups that's aligned or allied to Assad. the Russians said, now you could choose not to believe the Russians, but what you can't, but what should be on our side is common sense. And the fact that Assad, and we spoke about this before, that President Assad is the president of what? What does he control? He can't even. It's the Russian military is the one that is allowing, that is giving permission and denying entry into Syrian airspace. The Russian military, not Assad, not the Syrian Air Force, not the Syrian military, not no Syrian general. No, the Russians are calling the shots. So it tells me that Assad has really no authority in this country. He has, the Syrian military has been, the Syrian government and society has been decimated to the point that Assad does not have the resources to even secure what little weaponry he has.
Exactly.
Let's look at this. Over the past 15 years, and it might be that long, over the past 15 years, Syria has been bombed at least every day. By somebody, whether it was the United States, whether it was by Israel. Assad, Syria has been bombed almost on a daily basis by somebody. So where is all of these stockpile of weapons? And then number two is that why would Assad risk a military confrontation with the United States? I mean, you say what you want about Assad. There's a story that an Israeli paper published, and I'm kind of suspicious about that. But they claim that Arab social media is praising the Israeli strike on Syria because Assad is such a bad man. But okay, we're not here to defend Assad. What we're here to say is that we are being manipulated and we are being played upon, and we're actually, and the media, as it has done for the longest time, is doing its part of manipulating the American population once again to accept war somewhere else.
Exactly. And you brought up an excellent point about the fact that Assad is president of what? There's nothing left of Syria. There's little left of Syria. So if Assad doesn't have a military that he's actually controlling without significant help from Russia, because if Russia were not there, ISIS would have taken over Syria now, and that's when President Trump gets on the news and says that America has beaten back ISIS in Syria, he's lying. Now we know that Trump lies, so that shouldn't surprise us. What continues to be appalling is that not once has an American journalist responded to him saying, it is what's left of the Syrian army and Russia that has beaten ISIS back in Syria. It was not the United States.
Along with U.S. allies, rebel groups that were on the ground.
Exactly.
That took the fight to ISIS. We know that ISIS was ran out of Iraq by the revitalized Iraqi military.
Right.
The United States, yes, did not have any troops on the ground. They provided a lot of logistical support. They provided airstrikes. They provided, a lot of the technical support that went into removing ISIS. ISIS is not defeated, so let's say that.
Right.
ISIS is in Afghanistan right now, causing havoc.
They've just moved.
It's just like a hydra. Is that what we call it?
It's exactly like a hydra.
Right. So I mean, they haven't been defeated, and that's the problem that we have in the 21st century of this new age of warfare. When you're dealing with when you're not dealing with nation states. Right. So what happens is that the people you're fighting in this 21st century landscape of theater of war, they say, okay, all right, you got us here, but we'll just set up shop over here. Right. So what happens is that you're never really defeating them because it's about an ideology.
Exactly.
And we know that ideologies are very hard to defeat, often, so again, I mean, look, Nazi Germany, there hasn't been a Nazi Germany in over 70 years, yet Nazis still exist.
They still, I don't know.
And they're growing, you know.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's an ideology. So, I mean, we can also say that we never defeated Hitler, you know, because. So,
true.
Yeah.
Well, I think another thing we have to point out is another reason Russia got involved in Syria in the first place. Because, like you said before, they wanted to stop American imperialism, that they saw the results of what happened when we when we carried out regime change in Iraq and got rid of Saddam Hussein. And even with Saddam Hussein's evil, because he was not, when we say that these people, that some of these leaders should not have been removed from power, we're not saying we supported them. We're saying that we recognize the role they played in providing stability in that region.
Right.
Saddam Hussein was one of those people. And George Bush I recognized that.
Right.
That's why when he invaded Kuwait, he stopped at Kuwait. And he said, you know what? Nope, I'm not going into Iraq.
Even though generals like Schwarzkopf and them said, well, we should just go straight to Baghdad.
Exactly.
And George Bush I said, you're correct on that. The UN gave the United States the mandate to just clear Iraq out of Kuwait. George Bush I is the one that said, no, we only got a UN mandate for this. We're not going to go further, but we will impose no-fly zones.
Right.
So basically, the strategy was to just contain Saddam Hussein.
Exactly.
He can't, you know, and if you contain him, he can't be a threat to anyone else.
Right. But George Bush I also recognized that Saddam Hussein was the one leader in that region him and Muammar Gaddafi, and who stood in the way of extremists and rebel forces and stability. So George Bush I, or Senior Bush,
right,
decided, I'll go to Kuwait and I won't go any further. He could have taken out Hussein, but he recognized even then that would have been disastrous. And he even admitted it. But his son wanted that war glory that his father had, so he just went in.
Yeah, and George Bush II was manipulated by the neocons.
He was manipulated by the neocons that went into Iraq under this false pretense of weapons of mass destruction, murdered Saddam Hussein, installed some, I don't even know who it was.
Maliki, the
president. Oh, that's right. And what happened after they got rid of Saddam Hussein? Al-Qaeda.
Well, Al-Qaeda wind up setting up shop there. The so-called Sunni and Shia populations of Iraq started to become more fractured.
That's right.
And they started, become more balkanized.
Exactly.
Where, I mean, a guy like Saddam Hussein, when he was in power, was just like Tito in Yugoslavia, between the Serbs and the Bosnians and all that. I mean, they all hated each other, but Tito made sure that, Tito kept them from destroying,
waging all-out war against each other.
So then we seen what happened in the Balkans. I mean, we seen what happens when sometimes these areas need strong men. When Saddam Hussein was in power in Iraq, and Iraq has a very sizable Shia community and Sunni community. But, there was no civil war under Saddam Hussein because he made sure that wouldn't happen. Even when Iraq and Iran went to war with each other, Iran being the major Shia nation state, there was no Shia uprising in Iraq,
right?
On the side of Iran. So, I mean, again, we must understand that the United States does not have a very good track record when it comes to, we're good at breaking shit.
We can't fix what we
won't. Right.
No, let me change that. It's not that we can't. We won't.
No, because
we won't fix what we won't.
No, because it benefits us to leave these places destabilized.
Right.
I mean, most of these places that are destabilized have major resources. So that's what we want. We don't want, this government doesn't want a vibrant Iraq. It doesn't want a vibrant Syria. It doesn't want a vibrant Libya, because to keep these countries, and we talked about this with the Congo, and I don't want to get too far off point, but we talked about even in the Congo, which still has 35% of the world's resources, just in that one country, that that contains minerals that we can't do without when it comes to the cell phones and laptops and everything that we take for granted. I mean, you have one of the worst humanitarian crises in the Congo right now, and no one's coming there to fix that, because it is in the interest of business. It is in the interest of these major countries, not just the West. China's in their major interest to keep these countries destabilized so they can keep on extracting and extracting resources. So this is the goal of the militarism mainly from the West, and you know, in order to destabilize these places so that they can just keep on putting their hand in the cookie jar and nobody slaps it.
Exactly. We got some great comments over here on YouTube, and I'm going to get to them in a second. But Russia got involved in Syria because they saw what the United States government was about to do and repeat what it did in Iraq and in Libya. And what had the same thing happen in Libya. You got rid of Muammar Gaddafi and these extremists that Gaddafi had been successful in keeping at bay. We armed them so that they could get rid of Gaddafi.
Yeah, we armed one of the major rebel groups in Libya that were selling black Africans on the slave block.
Right.
You know, these are the people that this country took as allies.
Exactly. So Russia sees that we're about to do the same thing in Syria, and ISIS is in the region. Syria is trying to fight ISIS. Assad is trying to fight ISIS. All of his other problems, he was fighting rebel factions and ISIS in Syria. Russia was not going to allow the United States to turn Syria into another failed state for extremists. That's another reason why Russia got involved, because aside from American imperialism, it's the results of American imperialism, which are always the rise of extremist factions. We do that. Those are our responsibilities. So you have Russia involved in Syria, then you have China coming in. I told you there are a lot of moving parts here. You have China coming in, publicly stating that they will publicly support Russia militarily if the United States attacks in Syria.
Now, you know what was sad about that is the fact that there was not a peep about it on American news media.
Nothing.
There was, you know, and I don't want to be too much of an alarmist here, but this is very dangerous that our media takes these type of stories and these type of threats and just ignore them. What's going to happen, and I won't say that. What I pray doesn't happen is that we have nuclear missiles, warheads heading our way, and the American population don't know why.
Has no idea why, because you're literally being lied to about what's going. I mean, most of you know by now that our media is owned by 6 corporations, and one half of the corporations are owned by conservative interests, the other half are owned by liberal interests, and they both lie. They don't tell that. None of them tell us the truth.
So all governments lie, right?
All governments lie. But one of the comments that are being made, that's being made over here on YouTube, this is great. I love it when our friends know history and foreign policy.
Yeah, because that's our thing.
This is just so.
That's our thing.
Morganal Amathar says, I thought Assad was forced to give up his chemical weapons after the first gas attack under Obama.
Wow. There you go.
That's absolutely true.
Yep.
So explain to me how it is. This goes right back to what you said about Assad being in control of what? I mean, literally, we've seen the pictures of Syrian, a lot of Syrian cities. There's nothing left. Assad doesn't have a cache of chemical weapons. If he did, it would literally be in a bombed out building that anybody could go in there and get.
You know what Assad rules?
What?
Assad rules that one interview room in his house that he does interviews from.
Assad rules rubble.
Yeah,
basically.
Right. I mean, that one room that you see him give interviews in,
yep.
That's the only place that he rules. You know, but it's not that the Russians love Assad so much. This is about principle.
Yes, that's a great point.
It's about principle. It's about checking American aggression in the region.
Mm-hmm.
We can go back to the old Cold War checks and balances,
right.
Where, you know, but it's about really resources.
Yeah,
it's the fact that Russia does not want the United States to totally control the one of the most oil-rich areas in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, and we spoke about on this show a week ago about another reason for Russian why the Russians are so uptight about this whole thing. Mm-hmm. We had talked about how America with AFRICOM, and we talked about how the U.S. military is based. Back in the day when we were coming up, they used to talk about the Iron Curtain.
Right.
And the Iron Curtain, for those of you who are old enough to remember, was this thing of Russian influence, spirit influence, mm-hmm. and they call it the Iron Curtain. Mm-hmm. Well, the Iron Curtain now has, after the Cold War, there's not really anything as an Iron Curtain. Russian military bases, since the collapse of since the end of the Cold War, Russia has closed many of its bases. I think Russia might have maybe one overseas base, but compare that to the United States. The United States have almost 1,000 military bases, and if you look at the map, and I think we had the map up there, we might put it up again, they completely surround Russia.
Yeah.
So I mean, so if you're Putin, if you're a Russian military strategist, you will look at this, and how can you not take this as American and NATO, and the fact that there was almost another flashpoint in the Ukraine when the United States was actively courting Ukraine to join NATO. And that was the Russians drew a red line there. They in fact invaded Ukraine. Mm-hmm. You know, and this was under Obama.
Right.
And they in fact invaded Ukraine. Well, Obama, you know, Peace Prize winning Obama, wind up putting missiles in Poland.
Yes, he did.
You know, yeah, you know, the ever-loving Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize winner, you know. So he puts missiles in Poland, and he commits aggression in Libya, mm-hmm. Illegal, mm-hmm. according to international law.
That's right.
And then had plans to go into Syria. Russia blocked that. Mm-hmm. But this was something interesting that I want to get in why this is such a tinderbox. February 7th of this year mm-hmm. was the first time in 50 years that the United States and Russian military actually engaged each other.
Really?
In Syria. The United States, by some reports, were the story was that they were allegedly attacked by Russian mercenaries, right? The United States military repelled the attack, killing 200 to 300 Russian mercenaries.
Really?
Now that was swept under the rug. The Russians actually destroyed a couple of American tanks, or American-made tanks. Wow. We don't know if American servicemen were driving them, mm-hmm. but they were American-made tanks. The United States actually destroyed a Russian tank. So there were direct confrontations. Now, we know now that that they swept this under the rug. Mm-hmm. The American media basically ignored that.
Never said a word.
Never said a word about it. But the international press all over reported it. Mm-hmm. Of this clash between the United States military and Russian military, and there also been close calls in the air between Russian and wow. U.S. aircraft. So I mean, this stuff has been getting a lot more serious. And I'm gonna tell you who did not help none of this.
Who's that?
Nikki Haley.
Oh, she's just a repulsive. There are neocons, and then there's Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley gave a speech, or during deliberations at the United Nations, and she used language that, I mean, were
Very
literally
irresponsible language.
I mean, it was irresponsible, it was incendiary, it was aggressive, it was very arrogant. It was the epitome of exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. has always said about the United States being the greatest purveyor of violence in the world and being arrogant about it. Nikki Haley is the personification of that every time she speaks in the UN. And regardless of what countries' positions are on policies, you have to remember, at least I thought, that the UN existed in order to give diplomats a diplomatic way of working out their differences.
Yep, right.
It's supposed to be a civilized, diplomatic, non-aggressive, non-war way. Instead of countries going to war, they go to the UN, they present their case for why they have a problem with this country. The other members of the UN Council hears what people have to say, and they all decide on what should be done, and everybody should go home. Relatively, maybe not happy, but at least not throwing bombs at each other, because the UN is supposed to be the diplomatic avenue.
It's like a mob. It's like the mob. You're supposed to have a sit down.
You have a sit down. Nikki Haley came into the sit down basically with a loaded gun and pointed it with her words at the Russian representative. Right. And she has done this. She
was the Joey Zaza of the UN. You know, if anybody remember Godfather 3, Joey Zaza. But she was the Joey Zaza who came in there and just, you know. But you're right, Jackie. I mean, she used this incendiary language after the Russian ambassador to the UN basically just said, look, we're not going to allow the United States to no one asked you to be the policeman of the world. Right. No, and we're not going to sit back and allow the United States to continue to like go on this road of aggression that has been doing. Now now this was one of the strongest language I've heard a Russian diplomat use, especially in the United Nations. Now, I mean, if you had any kind of sense, you know, you would say, okay, look, maybe this thing might be getting a little too hot. Let me try to cool it down. After all, she is the diplomat to the United Nations. And she goes around and say, well, look, I understand what you're saying, but, you know, we're going to do it anyway. And we don't need... So, two things bother me with that. One is the fact that there is no more art of diplomacy when it comes to American politicians. That's number one. Pardon me. Number two is they just discredit what the UN is all about, what the UN is supposed to stand for. Why even have a United Nations when the United States as a permanent security member and remind you now, these positions of being on the Security Council these were supposed to be the responsible nations. Right. You know, these were supposed to be the responsible nations. That's why they were put in those places. They were supposed to be responsible. But how can you have a so-called responsible member of the Security Council basically just undermining what the UN is supposed to stand for? Where's the responsibility in that when you're just going to say, well, screw you what the UN says or the consensus of the world nations, what they think about what we're planning on doing. We're going to do it anyway. And what kind of arrogance is that? And that, I mean, that, excuse me, really is what she said. Yep. The presiding member of the Security Council said, listen, we are not giving the United States authority to do anything in Syria. And Nikki Haley just said, well, yeah, okay, that's fine, but we're going to do it anyway because we have a right to. And that's just, nobody's going to respect that. I mean, Germany, Angela Merkel, in light of some of this information that I'm sure she has sat down with her defense ministers and advisors, and they have told her, now look, Angela, there's some other stuff going on here. Don't get involved in this mess. Angela Merkel has said, you know what? We're not supporting the United States in this stuff. We recognize
that they're going to do what they're going to do, but we don't have to be involved.
I mean, even the French are trying to weasel their way out of it.
Yeah, because now Macron is saying that he has proof.
Right.
He has evidence that Assad committed the chemical gas attacks, but he's not saying what the evidence is. You know why?
But he's also saying that he needs to think again what kind of action France would take. He's trying to. What they're saying is that, you know, Merkel, Macron, and a lot of them, they're not going to allow Trump to put them on this track
exactly
of a direct confrontation with Russia.
But see, a lot of people are beginning to understand that you can't just believe what your media tells you, and they're looking behind the scenes. So now Trump comes out with another tweet. The tweeter in chief,
right?
Says,
Twitter diplomacy.
Yeah. Oh, that I'm so glad you said that. So Trump comes out with this tweet today, I think, or yesterday, saying, "Well, he's trying to walk back his threat now."
Of course he is,
because his threat really is ridiculous. Just given the information that we just told you about what's really what's really going on, the landscape, the lay of the land, and who we're really talking about. We're not just talking about throwing some Tomahawk missiles at an empty airfield that does no damage to anybody, which is what he did last year, remember, where he warned Russia that he was going to do that before he did it. And they were like, all right.
But I mean, you know, just on a side note, isn't that very sad that those Tomahawk missiles that they launched cost altogether $50 million at an empty airfield? And
not only did they cost $50 million, which was just a publicity stunt for an unpopular president, an expensive publicity stunt, but Raytheon's stock price, their stock value went up, of course, $50 billion after. Yeah, so we're not talking about now another stunt, publicity stunt that he can pull, because I feel like, and it's not like we are fans of Vladimir Putin, but it's like you kind of have to play what would you do, right? If I were Putin, I would give Trump one shot. You know what? I'm going to give you this one time. Fine. Do your missiles. Give us time to move our troops out of the way. That's because that's what they did.
Well, that's what they're doing now. Reports is that Assad and them are removing their whatever military equipment they have from these areas.
But see, Russia is like, you know what? I'm not playing this game anymore. We're not playing this game with you anymore because you're unpopular, and because what you American presidents do when you're unpopular with your people is to go start a war. There's too much at stake here, and I'm not playing this game anymore. So no, I'm not going to sit here and sit back and do nothing while you throw some more missiles at our soldiers. Because if you kill our soldiers this time, we're going to have, you're not just going to have to deal with us, you're also going to have to deal with China, and you're also going to have to deal with Turkey. But let's talk about, for a second, that's right, the Twitter diplomacy. So Trump, somebody in his advising team, so one of his advisors was an actual adult, and said, Jesus Christ, Donnie, stop this shit. And he had to try to walk back that threat. So he tweets today, I never said when or if we're going to take action against Syria. So he's trying to do some damage control and walk back his threat. The problem is that, like I said, Putin is like, I don't care what you're trying to do, because somebody, I think it was Putin, I don't know if it was Putin or if it was the defense minister of Russia, who responded on Twitter. It was either Twitter or an interview. He said, we don't do Twitter diplomacy.
Right.
This is too important for us to make these kinds of decisions on Twitter. We don't do Twitter diplomacy. Somebody's an adult in the room, and it is ridiculous that here we are sitting in the so-called great United States of America. I know that's arguable, but we're counting on leaders of other countries being the adults in the room, because we know that man in the White House is a petulant child.
Yeah, and now I'm going to give my opinion. Do I think that the United States and Russia would have a nuclear war? Probably not. There has been reports by various news media that says that backdoor channels, diplomatic channels, are being used by the United States and Russia. So they're talking. You know, they're talking to each other. Putin doesn't want a war with us. And like you said, leaving Donald Trump aside, I think that those who are the adults in the room with him is actually no one wants a war because there's no winners in that war. Right. The second thing is that now, do I think that there'll be maybe some more skirmishes that might happen? Yes, that's a possibility. Yeah. I think that it would be the skirmishes will, and this is where we segue into our other talking point. I think that the skirmishes could be greatly reduced if the United States put a muzzle on their dog Israel. Ooh, ooh, ooh! Because I think that is I think that is some fuel on the fire that doesn't need to be there.
That is really what's going on here. If we want to categorize this as a false flag attack, meaning that they're telling you one thing is happening, but the thing they're telling you is happening really isn't what's going on, there's something else behind it. This conflict between Israel and Iran is the thing that's being covered up. And we know it's being covered up because it wasn't mentioned at all in American media. No. But it was reported widely, excuse me, in Israel media. Why? Excuse me, because Monday, Israel launched an attack. They actually did launch an attack on an Iranian military position in Syria, killing 14. 7 of those 14 people were Iranian soldiers. Right. Iran is now at the point where I'm tired. We're tired of Israel's crap. We're just tired of Israel's crap. Why is Israel involved in this? Because Israel has always said, the government of Israel has always said, that they would never allow Iran to establish a permanent military presence in Syria. Exactly. So this whole conflict between Israel and Iran, and that has to do with Israel accusing Iran of funneling weapons to terrorist organizations through Syria within Israel. It's kind of hard to commit genocide against a people if they're armed and they're defending themselves. That's just my take on it. And I'm sure it's deeper than that. But we have a government that is so controlled by the lobby for the Israeli government that they are willing to lie to the American public about a potential start of World War III and blame it on Russia or Syria and Assad fabricating some chemical attacks that Assad really cannot possibly carry out because, as it was noted, Syria gave up their chemical weapons in 2014.
And if you remember during that time, and I'm glad that our friend pointed that out, because remember during that time of when this whole thing with Assad giving up his chemical weapons, remember how many times U.S. Military airplanes were supposed to be bombing Syrian military positions? Right. This is what I was talking about. It was like every day, and I remember even during that time, Jackie, I was saying, man, how many more military positions this guy got? I know. It was like every day. Oh, they bombed the Syrian chemical depot, or they bombed this. Right. I said, well, you know, I mean, what's left? You know, so, but the thing with Israel, and I believe that Israel, you're right. Israel wanted to attack Iran during the early days of the Gulf War. I mean, with Iraq. And the United States, and rightfully so, refused to allow Israeli warplanes to cross Iraqi airspace. Because that's what they wanted to do when Iran was supposed to be building their nuclear reactor. Right. Netanyahu, who is like one of them people, he's always around. he ordered he wanted an Israeli strike on the site, but the United States, not wanting to, one of the few times the United States used some kind of wisdom, they did not want an escalation in that area if Israel would have bombed Iran. So they wisely said, no, you can't use the airspace. The distance between Israel and Iran is great, where the Israelis, I mean, they probably have the capabilities of doing it and coming back, but you know, that was a no-go. Now it appears that with Donald Trump in office, and this is the thing that is also worrisome. There was a time, even during early Republican administrations, when Israel, in spite of its intentions, in spite of what it wanted to do in the region, the United States had some kind of influence. I remember George Bush I refusing after the Israeli was building all these settlements, and George Bush I, seeing how harmful that was, he told Ariel Sharon, he said, either you dismantle those settlements or we're not going to give you any more aid. You know, now that's the last American president that I can recall that that stood up that strongly to Israeli aggression. And that was one of the major reasons, or probably the major reasons, that Ariel Sharon took it upon himself to remove those settlers out of the West Bank, because George Bush I was like, man, well, you know, you ain't getting that money if you don't dismantle these settlements. You know, we have not had a president since that actively stood up. Obama tried, but you know, but there hasn't been. Israel's been telling us what to do. Israel's been dictating policy for us. Israel's been dictating what our military should be doing, and I think that's what's really dangerous. Netanyahu, I believe, used this airstrike not only to set up this this confrontation with Iran, but also to distract us from what the hell they're doing to the Palestinians.
Exactly. Not only to distract us from what they're doing to the Palestinians, because the IDF just shot and killed 20 unarmed protesters on the Palestinian side of the Gaza fence. Just shot them. Shot one man while he was praying. And there's a video that was on social media that I think now has been taken down, and you'd probably be hard-pressed to find it, of an IDF soldier shooting an unarmed Palestinian who was on the other side of the fence.
And somebody celebrated. They were celebrating. And
he's celebrating.
Well, not him, but the person that took the picture.
Celebrating this unarmed Palestinian being shot. So that has happened. The government of Israel has taken heat internationally for that. Netanyahu is in criminal trouble. He is, I think he's about to be indicted. But this, so world opinion about the government of Israel is changing, because people are beginning to see what the government of Israel is actually doing to the Palestinian people. And they're seeing beyond the years and years of propaganda that a lot of conservative American white Christian politicians have helped Israel spread.
Now, Bruce Zhang, I just wanted to mention this. He's right. Bruce Zhang said that the Saudis also dictate our foreign policy as well. What is not really, I mean, what's been mentioned, it's been mentioned a lot, not in American media, of course, is the atrocities that the Saudi military is committing in Yemen.
I
mean, the Saudis have basically, I mean, they just been let off the leash, and they're basically just destroying, or have basically destroyed the Yemenis people, the more, you know, with their bombing campaign and everything like that. And they too, I mean, have the United States have just sold the Saudis like the largest military package outside of Israel. You know, so they got these brand new weapons, these brand new lethal weapons, and they're just basically just committing all kind of atrocities in Yemen right now. And so, I mean, so again, when you follow the road jacket, where all of this points back to, it points at the steps of Washington, D.C.
It really does. And a couple of other things, excuse me, and we're going to wrap this up. We can talk about this all night, but we got stuff to do.
Oh, but one thing I wanted to mention, because I'm glad you touched on one thing that I think we should not ignore, is the whole religious underbelly of all of this. We have two players in this, religious players, that is basically fueling this along. We have the Christian extreme right, and we have the Jewish extreme right. Both of them believe that if they can manipulate events in the region, the Jews believe that their Messiah will come, and the Christians will believe that Jesus will come, who the Jews don't accept as the Messiah, but you know, who the Christians believe is the Messiah. So you got these events that are being done, not just basically for political reasons, but also for religious reasons.
Yes.
There has been a video that was circulating around for a while of Benjamin Netanyahu talking to a rabbi, and the rabbi was basically admonishing him about you need to do this and do that in order to to make sure that the Messiah comes and everything. Now, I don't know the authenticity of the video. I know it's been going around, so I might not want to rely too much on that. But what we can rely upon is the public declarations of these politicians, both in Israel and the public declarations of Christian extremists in the United States.
Yes, and as Christians ourselves, as people of faith ourselves, one of the very first comments on YouTube was posted by someone that was a reference to Isaiah 17:1, where it foretells the destruction of Damascus and that Syria is going to be the jewel of Jerusalem. And Christian fundamentalists use misinterpreted scripture that are taken out of historical context, because we're talking about an event in Isaiah that happened at a specific period of time. It does not refer to events that are happening today. Not only is Isaiah not like a historical chronicle or a portend of what is supposed to happen for the nation state of Israel, even if it were, the Bible does not give the nation state of Israel the right to go about achieving those goals the way they are. And it does not give American Christians the right to support the nation state of Israel abusing people's human rights, physical rights, civil rights, and murdering people and oppressing them and creating an apartheid state in order to bring about the Messiah. Because if you believe in God and if you believe in Jesus, then you believe that they don't need our help in order to do whatever it is they need to do. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the two different views on the end times prophecy.
Oh, yeah, they both have the same goals.
Yeah, they're both of the Christian fundamentalists believe that in order for Jesus to return, Israel Jerusalem has to be given to Israel, because Jesus is going to return back to Jerusalem. But,
and we also have to understand that both Israel and the United States right now currently have the most right-wing governments that they ever had.
Exactly. But even in their end-time prophecies, these people are not honest, because Christian fundamentalists don't admit that in the Christian end times prophecy, when Jesus returns, 200,000 Jews will convert to Christianity. They will believe in Jesus, and every other Jew who doesn't will basically go to hell. They will die and go to hell. That's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. They never talk about that. And then in the Jewish end times prophecy, they don't even recognize Jesus as the Messiah. They're waiting for a whole nother Messiah that's not Jesus. So these people, right, these players are they
and that's not getting to the whole Muslim end time thing of Damascus of Jesus returning to Damascus and setting up shop there. So I mean, everybody's looking for the Messiah, but they're doing about it the wrong way.
Exactly. And the Messiah, if you believe in Messiah, is sitting there going, I don't need y'all's help. I don't need your help. I didn't tell you to do it like this. I don't need your help. But the last thing I want us to talk about really quick that this is connected to is the Iran nuclear deal. Trump and the conservatives have been talking about this stinking nuclear deal for years and years and years, ever since Obama made it, and they have tried to find a reason to punish Iran. Because they've tried to say that Iran has not, that that it's a bad deal, that Iran hasn't.
Yeah, they say it's a bad deal, but they never accuse Iran of not honoring the deal.
Because they know that Iran has not honored the deal. Iran has not done anything to violate the nuclear deal made between President Obama and the government of Iran. They haven't violated any part of the deal, so the United States has no valid, legitimate reason to move against Iran because of this nuclear deal. But this is why Israel had to get involved and bomb an Iranian military site in Syria so that the United States could have a reason to say, well, now we have to support Israel when Iran responds to what Israel did. All of this is just subterfuge to getting to supporting Israel to get the war in the Middle East that they really want. And much of this is about end times prophecy, but much of this is also from Donald Trump's perspective about making Barack Obama look bad, because remember Obama's red line in the sand in Syria? Right. Well, now Trump can say, well, I drew a red line, and when it was crossed, I did something. It's Donald Trump and his little ego that's involved in this too. Him wanting to smear Obama. Not that we're Obama fans, but let's just call that what it is.
Right. Well, I mean, I just think that at what price though? Right. This whole American hubris and the arrogance that's going on, the fact that the United States is probably the most hated right now. And we were talking about this earlier, before when they had 9/11, and they were talking about, oh, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us because we let women wear miniskirts, and oh, they hate us because we have McDonald's, or they hate us because of our freedom. Well, you know what? You know why they really hate us? They hate us because we're a bunch of assholes.
Yeah.
That's why they hate us. Yep. That's why we're being hated, because we're a bunch of assholes. And the fact that we just can't lay this at our government's feet. And the reason why I say this is that despite or in spite of or despite of the American media not giving us the information, we're on the web every day.
Yeah.
Most of us and I, are on the web every day. These stories exist. We have access to Al Jazeera. We have access to NHJ, foreign news source. We have this. So, all right, CNN don't tell us, MSNBC don't tell us, Fox don't tell us, but we have access in this age of information. The fact is the fact that they hate us because we're a bunch of assholes. And it's not just the government. We're assholes too. You know why? Because we're not flooding the streets of Washington, D.C. and cities around the world talking about we don't want this shit. We don't want politicians threatening our lives and threatening the future of our children, our grandchildren's lives with a possible nuclear confrontation. That we're tired of war, that we have a generation of kids who are probably 19 years old now that all they known was war. Yeah. All they known is that we were in war, we were at war with somebody. So we should include ourselves amongst the assholes, because we should be out there demanding that our government stop this nonsense and demand that we pull these troops out of these areas, these spots that they're in, because Afghanistan is getting worse every day, and though we've been there almost 20 years. Iraq is no better. Every place we've been. Libya is has destabilized to the point where people are yearning for the days of Muammar Gaddafi. Right. So we, as the American public, we should be out there demanding that this government stop leading us down the road to potential destruction. Have we not learned from history? Have we not learned that that Nazi Germany, that the destruction that Hitler and the Nazis done to the world and millions of people that was done when the Russians invaded Nazi Germany? You know what the Russians said? Why they were so cruel to the German people? Wow. They was like, y'all supported these guys.
Wow.
They showed films of every. Now you could say that the German people didn't have no choice, but didn't they? I mean, after all, there was the Nazi Party, and then there's the German nation. You know what I mean? So I mean, you had a nation of about 70 million people. You mean to tell me that they wanted shit to change? They couldn't go and say, we don't want these guys. We don't want what Hitler's doing. We don't want this and want that. But for whatever reason, the Jews were allowed to be exterminated. The Jews were allowed to be deported out of Israel. Other minority groups were allowed to be persecuted, and Hitler led them down to a road to destruction. And so when the enemies came at the gate, they didn't have any sympathy for German citizens because they said, you guys didn't stop this madman from doing what he was doing.
And he didn't come to power overnight.
And he didn't come to power overnight, and no one stopped him. So what is going to be our excuse when the enemies is at our gate? Don't think it can't happen.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So they hate us because we're a bunch of assholes. We elect assholes, and we justify it through what I call asshole-isms. You know what I mean? We elect assholes, and then we don't do anything about changing. We don't want people. We don't want responsible people.
Right.
You know, the responsible people, we don't want them because they're too smart. They talk too intelligent. They this and that, the other. We want people who mock us, who come out on private owned jets. Billionaires on private jets who mock us as a working class, and then we elect them because they throw the racist bait at us, and they throw all of these things that our small intellect grasp hold to, because we don't want to think bigger than the little racist bites that they throw at us. And then we get these leaders in there, then they do some dumb stuff, and then all of a sudden, and we're not flooding the streets saying, I mean, Trump is about to have a military parade, the first of its kind in a long time in this country. And I mean, not once. We should be like that Chinese guy in Tiananmen Square back in the 90s.
Yes.
We should lay in front of them tanks, or whatever military vehicles that's going to come down there, and be like, no, this is not the country we want. And we're not going to allow the billionaire class who are right now ruling us to lead us down the road to destruction. They got their bunkers. Yep. You know what I mean? They got their bunkers in the Sierra Mountains or underground, or all these multi-million-dollar damn bunkers that they pay for. They got their stuff. You know what I mean? When the bombs start falling over here, they'll go down to the Cayman Islands somewhere. But where does that leave the rest of us? And that's where we need to start talking about. So yeah, so that's why they hate us. They hate us because we're a bunch of assholes. And the only way that we can start getting this country right on track is we got to get rid of the assholes who are our leaders.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes tonight's broadcast of Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation. Please share this video. Please know that on Saturday, the Luqmans are actually going to start getting out in the streets. Well, not start, because we've been doing this for a while. But we put our money where our mouth is. We are going to be participating in Answer Coalition's spring action against war in Syria here in Washington, D.C.
And if you're in the DMV area, come and join us.
Come and join us.
Yes.
This is not. There are other actions going on around the country. I think there's something that's going to be happening in Boston, maybe in New York City. But absolutely, the day of this military parade, which is supposed to happen on Veterans Day, there are being plans made for resistance actions on that day. We plan to be there.
Yep.
We are participating in planning for a women's march on the Pentagon in November. The anti-war movement in this country needs to be revitalized. Not just because of what's currently going on in Syria, because militarism, racism, and income inequality.
That's right.
Are the three evils that we must eradicate from this society. I didn't say that. Martin Luther King Jr. did. And he also said that you cannot get rid of one unless you get rid of all of them. And unless we get rid of all of them, we will never progress and become a great nation.
And I make this one more thing. If I'm down there if I'm allowed to get through there, I know security will be tight. My fat ass gonna be under somebody's military vehicle. They're gonna have to run over my fat ass.
What?
I don't want to see this.
No,
I don't want to be in a country like this.
This is not what we want. This is not what we want. Get the bail money ready. Get the bail money ready. I used to say, look, you know, people, not everybody can get arrested. Listen, there are some things, there are some periods in time which you just have to be prepared to give up everything.
That's it.
And if we do not want to lose what little bit of country we have left that we're trying to save, then we're going to have to give up, be willing to give up everything from this day forward. And we're starting on Saturday. So, thank y'all so much on YouTube for joining us. Don't worry, Bonnie. You can see the replay. Forgive me, y'all. I've recovering from a sinus infection. Share this video. Join us. We will be doing excuse me, live broadcast weekly every Thursday night at 9 p.m.
Yep.
We'll see y'all next week. Thank y'all very much for joining us.
Love you guys.
Luqman Nation. Love you. Have a great evening. Be good to each other. Peace. Oh, excuse me.